I fear I may have gotten badly bogged down in this Descartes series, and I really need to pick up the pace. In addition, the storage issue on my newer phone worked itself out somehow, so I'm back sitting at the desk. All right, we are in Meditation 2 of the Discourse on Method. Meditation 2 is subtitled, Concerning the Nature of the Human Mind, that it is better known than the body. The whole point of Meditation 2 is to learn to understand the mind, and the point of Descartes, writing all this, saying all this stuff, is to demonstrate that the mind is a thing we can have a much solider knowledge of than anything physical. All right, we are in the Hackett edition, translated by Donald Kress, and we read, From these considerations I am beginning to know a little better what I am, but it still seems, and I cannot resist believing, that corporeal things, whose images are formed by thought and which the senses themselves examined, are much more distinctly known than this mysterious I, which does not fall within the imagination. Corporeal means physical. He says, from these considerations, he's beginning to know a little better what he is. He is a thinking thing. But it still seems, and he can't help resisting the belief that physical things are more easy to know and to understand than non-physical things. And I need to clarify one other thing. The imagination in this philosophical usage of the term imagination means the mental power of representing physical things. There is I'll use the same example I used last time, the green book and the warm teacup outside of my mind, and then there's my senses that put me in contact with them, but the mental image I have of a green book, the mental image is not the right word, but I can't find an alternative word, the mental image of the warm teacup. That's what imagination is. And I close my eyes when I say that to emphasize that imagination is purely in the mind, but really you can make the same point with your eyes open, and if you can, then you're understanding it better. The green book exists outside my mind. The warm teacup exists outside my mind, and my senses, my eyes, and my sensation of touch on my fingers gives me a sensation of the green, of the warmth, but the mental image of the green and the mental, for lack of a better word, image of the warmth in my mind is what imagination is. All right, so he says that things, he has a habit of thinking that physical things are better known than the mind. What is this mysterious mind, this mysterious I? Ego in Latin. What is this mysterious I which is not known through this mental imagery? And his old habits pull him in this way, pull him towards this way of thinking. A huge theme of Meditation 2 is rehabituating the mind to contemplate non-physical rather than physical reality. Here, Descartes is very similar to a whole lot of older philosophy, things like Plato and Augustine. He says, I see what is happening. My mind loves to wander and does not yet permit itself to be restricted within the confines of truth. And then he goes through an experiment. And this experiment is meant to, first of all, to illustrate something, to teach something, to show something about what matter is. And most importantly, it's meant to retrain his mind towards understanding what matter is, and towards understanding that the mind itself is better known than the body, and to get rid of all those bad habits that pull the mind towards physical modes of thinking and away from contemplation of non-physical reality. He says, let us consider those things which are commonly believed to be the most distinctly grasped of all, namely the bodies we see and touch. Bodies here means physical things. Let us consider the physical things that people normally think are the most clearly known of all. We normally think that the mind, or any other supposed non-physical reality, is not nearly as clearly known as the physical thing, the book, the teacup, the stapler, the red pen. We think physical things are better known than non-physical things. And so Descartes says, oh yeah, well, let's try an example. And he takes a very convenient example. He says, let us take, for instance, this piece of wax. I wish I had a piece of wax in here to illustrate with. I don't. From working with, I'm a great expert, but I have harvested honey from bees in Texas. So I have some experience working with good beeswax straight from the hives. And Descartes says of the wax that he happens to have on him as he's writing this book, it has been taken quite recently from the honeycomb. It has not yet lost all the honey flavor. It retains some of the scent of the flowers from which it was collected. And he talks about its color, shape, size. It's hard and cold. It's easy to touch. If you rap on it with your knuckle, it will emit a sound, much like that, but with wax and without spilling tea. Then he says, as I am speaking, I am bringing it close to the fire. So he has some wax. He also has a candle, or perhaps a fireplace. I'm not real clear on what sort of fire, and it doesn't matter. He brings the wax closer to the fire, and the remaining traces of the honey flavor are disappearing. The scent is vanishing. The color is changing. The original shape is disappearing. Note how many senses he's covering in a single sentence. Taste, smell, sight, and touch. And its size is increasing, is becoming liquid and hot. You can hardly touch it. Now when you rap on it, it no longer emits any sound, so now sound as well. Taste, sight, smell, hearing, touch. Yeah, I think he covered all five senses. He says all five senses now encounter with the same piece of matter completely different results. Well, largely different, dramatically, significantly different result. Does the same wax still remain? I must confess that it does. No one denies it. No one thinks otherwise. So what was there in the wax that was so distinctly grasped? Certainly none of the aspects I reached by means of the senses. So the five senses put him in touch with a particular flavor, smell, feel, sound, sight, and now the same thing is giving out different flavor, smell, feel, sound, sight. It's the same thing, but now all its properties have changed. So, what actually is it? And how do we know what it is? Perhaps the wax was what I now think it is. Namely, that the wax itself never really was the sweetness of the honey, nor the fragrance of the flowers, nor the whiteness, nor the shape, nor the sound, but instead was a body that a short time ago manifested itself to me in these ways, and now does so in other ways. But just what precisely is this thing that I thus imagine? Let us focus our attention on this and see what remains after we have removed everything that does not belong to the wax, only that it is something extended, flexible, and mutable. And here I don't know that I can avoid using another vocabulary word, and the vocabulary word is extended. To be extended is to occupy space, to take up space, to exist in 3 dimensions. And so Descartes is saying what the wax actually is simply a thing that is extended. It has all these properties that we can access with our 5 senses. The property of flavor, smell, how it feels when we touch it, its hardness, flavor, smell, touch, color, shape, size. What did I miss? What did I leave out? Taste, sight, smell, hearing. How it sounds, how it looks, how it tastes, how it smells, how it feels. These are its properties. But that's not what the thing is. Those are just its properties. The thing itself is nothing but extension, or the occupation of space. And that's all matter is. Matter is that which occupies space, and that's all it is. Therefore, this insight is not achieved by the faculty of imagination. Hang on, let me rewind just a bit. I grasp that the wax is capable of innumerable changes of this sort, even though I'm incapable of running through these innumerable changes by using my imagination. So that power of forming a mental image of things, imagination, is not enough to understand all the infinite modifications that are available to the wax. Therefore, this insight is not achieved by the faculty of imagination. What is it to be extended? Is this thing's extension also unknown? Etc. It remains then for me to concede that I do not grasp what this wax is through the imagination, rather I perceive it through the mind alone. Okay, that's the point. The point is, what the wax is, and this is just an experiment that could in theory work for any physical thing, it's just a little easier to run through it with wax. What the wax is just extension, or the occupation of space the taking up of space in 3 dimensions. That's all the wax is, and that's all matter is. And it's not the senses that know this. All they understand is the properties, how it tastes, smells, feels, etc. But that is something, those are things that can change completely while the object remains the same. So we don't know through the senses. And as for the imagination, well, the imagination is just mental imagery of what we get through our senses. So knowing that it is something that takes up space, that it is essentially and only extension, knowing that that is what matter is not something known through the senses or the imagination that depends on the senses. It's known by the mind alone. I do not grasp what this wax is through the imagination, rather I perceive it through the mind alone. I need to realize that the perception of the wax is neither a seeing nor a touching nor an imagining, nor has it ever been, even though it previously seemed so. Rather, it is an inspection on the part of the mind alone. So the mind is what knows matter. Perception is not an act of the senses, but of the mind. Knowing what extension is, knowing that matter is extended, that it takes up space, is not a power of the 5 senses, but a power of the mind alone. Not only is the mind a thing better known than the body, but the mind is also the only way of knowing matter in the first place. We don't get knowledge of matter from our senses, we get it from the mind alone.